Welcome to Layer the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. And on today's episode, I have a very special guest with me. Author, journalist, artist, Martin Popoff is here with me, and we are going to be discussing the early pre-MTV era of ZZ Top. We are going to be going album by album, talking about each record, giving you our favorite songs from those albums, and at the end, we're going to rank these albums for you. So Martin, welcome back to the Lair.
Yes, thanks for having me, John. It's very cool. Any day talking about ZZ Top is a cool day. So.
A good way to start our day. We're filming this here first thing in the morning. So, all right. Well, probably like a lot of people my age, I discovered ZZ Top during the MTV era with Eliminator, with the videos, with the cars, the beards, the girls, the crazy looking guitars, the fuzzy guitars, the spinning guitars, that whole thing. And, I thought it was kind of cool. Honestly, it didn't inspire me to really go out and buy any of it. But it wasn't until I got this album, Tejas, that I really got blown away and was like, whoa, wait a minute here. There's another side of ZZ Top that I wasn't aware of. And what I loved about this era of the band when I heard them is I talk about this on the channel. I'm not a huge fan of kind of stock, standard kind of blues stuff, but ZZ Top kind of has their own take on the blues, and for me, it's very kind of unique and interesting, and so that appealed to me. I also absolutely love Billy Gibbons' guitar sound. For me, it is the definition of warmth, fullness. Whenever I hear Billy's sound, I just think of warm, glowing tubes in an amplifier. I mean, it's just fantastic. And he has that sound all over these early albums. And also for me, the secret, shall we say, salsa in the mix here with ZZ Top is much similar to AC/DC. ZZ Top in some ways is like AC/DC. They're blues-based bands, a little boogie element to them, but guitar based, very straightforward in concept. But the secret is in the swing. It's in the feel. Martin, I use this term all the time, and I took it from you, the AC/DC swing. Well, I think ZZ Top has a similar thing. It's this very laid back, big, huge Texas-sized pocket in their sound. The way Billy plays is very sort of behind the beat. And whenever I think of ZZ Top and think of the sound of ZZ Top, I always think of this image from the inside of Tres Hombres. I mean, it's a beer, it's a bunch of sloppy, greasy Mexican food, but oh boy, does it taste good. For me, this just sort of is the ZZ Top sound right there. So Martin, when did you discover ZZ Top? When did you get into this era? What do you like about this era and ZZ Top in general?
Wow, I probably got into ZZ Top. I would say I've never actually really thought about that. It probably would have been Tres Hombres time. I remember they were just always around. So I became cognizant and a huge music fan probably around 72, 73. So I would have been about 10 years old. So 73, all those records were around. They were a pretty famous band. They were on the radar with a few hits at that point. I mean, not really. I mean, talk to them and they would complain that it took us a long time to get big, right? But they were already known with Tres Hombres. So yeah, I'd say it goes back about that far.
Cool. And what is it about that you like about,
Well, I love what you were saying about how they do the blues different, because I think I did a podcast episode of my History in 5 Songs thing. And if I haven't, I should do it, because I talk about this all the time, about the idea of how to make the blues interesting, right? And I always put ZZ Top in very close proximity with Foghat. And then maybe a little bit of Pat Travers Band, but also in a slightly different way, and across the pond, Status Quo, in terms of these bands who have learned how to make the blues interesting. And then a newer band, I put Clutch in that department as well. So I love this idea of they're taking all the cool things I liked about the blues and leaving behind all the things I didn't like, and then just amping it up and changing it and adding heavy metal and adding riffs and adding humor and changing up the speeds. And smartly, it's not there are songs that are completely rote blues, which I don't like at all, but there's songs that use the rote blues thing, which are fine. But then the whole blues thing, when people talk about it, there's really two things: there's blues and boogie, right? So that's what Status Quo does well, for example, right? I mean, some of the greatest, most magical things are Down Down and Little Lady and Backwater. Just Take Me from Status Quo, same sort of thing. And Foghat's a funny one because I always think of how we talk about Blue Oyster Cult, the black and white period, right? So Foghat and ZZ Top both have the brown period, right? The brown sound, because it is actually a brown sound with ZZ Top. So they have the first two albums, which are brown, and then Foghat has the first two albums which are brown enough, and then the third album is Energized, and then the fourth one is brown, and then they modernize, sort of thing, after that. So it's funny that there's the brown sound there. But I wanted to show this. I know I did this on the Contrarians, but any time to show this is a cool situation. So this is something I got at a record show once. This is called This is your Welcome to ZZ Top's Tejas kit. Check that out, eh? So inside this is some big styrofoam ZZ Top letters to hang up, right?
Love it.
There's your big O, from the standard logo, and included are just some record covers with nothing in them for some of the early stuff. And then a Tejas, store hanger with a little hole in it, right? Two-sided. It's kind of cool, eh? Laminated. And then there was, what is this thing? I don't even remember what this is. Oh yeah, so we've got a 3-panel Tejas poster. Came in it. And then, let's see, next is, there's another Tejas thing. What does that say there? It's here, the new ZZ Top album and tape.
Wow.
That's kind of cool. A little sticky on the back for putting it maybe on your window. I don't know. And then this just little thing mounted on cardboard explains what's in the kit. We've got a Tejas decal and a ZZ Top for President bumper sticker. And then yeah, some flats, some Tejas flats. Let's see, anything else cool in here? Yeah, just the other album cover. So that's kind of a cool thing that I like. And Tejas, well, I won't give it away. Tejas is, let's just say it's one of my favorites. But yeah, I don't know. Where do you want to take it from here?
All right. Well, I thought I'd give just a brief history here of the early part of ZZ Top, because for some people, especially if you're my age or younger, you hear some of the hits from this era on the radio, but I think a lot of people aren't quite aware of how far back ZZ Top goes. The band formed in '69. They've had the same lineup until Dusty Hill passed away in 2021. So Dusty Hill on bass, Frank Beard on drums, and of course Billy Gibbons on guitar. In fact, when I was researching this, it said that they are the longest running rock group or pop group to have the same lineup, which is pretty incredible. And they go even far enough back that Jimi Hendrix is on the record talking about how Billy Gibbons is one of his favorite, like at that time, up and coming guitar players. So that is how far back ZZ Top goes. Their first 5 albums, we're going to be talking about 7 albums during this period, what we call the pre-MTV phase of the band. Eliminator would be the beginning of the MTV era for them. So before Eliminator, we had 7 albums. The first 5 of those were on London Records. And then they would go on a bit of a hiatus for like about 2-3 years. And then they would come back and they would release 2 more on Warner Brothers Records before we get to Eliminator. Their CD catalog is messy. I have all the original vinyls here, so the CD versions aren't a concern of mine, but reading around on the internet, and I've heard this way before I even, thought about this video, that some of the early versions of the CDs that came out, the original issues of their CDs, apparently the drums were replaced with electronic drums or something. I don't really know. I've never heard any of these. I think that most of this stuff has since been reissued back with the original mixes and everything, but just tread cautiously if you're out there looking, finding used ZZ Top CDs. A lot of the diehard fans don't really care for those early versions of the CDs. Also of note, their manager, Bill Ham, would also be their producer for all their albums in the 70s, 80s, and I believe even all through the 90s. I don't think it was really until the 2000s, I think, where he sort of became like a side producer, and then the last so many records, I think, are just produced by Billy Gibbons. But he was their manager, and he was also produced the records, and he was sort of the visionary for the band. And as they moved into the phase of the hats and the beards and stuff like that, he was sort of a person that influenced that. So, got anything to add to the early history of ZZ Top, Martin?
No, that's pretty accurate. I mean, Bill Ham was more of an executive producer. I mean, there were always very important engineers. He's kind of just sort of taken the credit, and the band was actually very involved as well. But yeah, there's the interesting hiatus phase after the worldwide Texas tour, where Billy goes off to Europe and he hangs out with punks and does all this stuff, and Frank gets clean, and Dusty goes and works at the airport as like a baggage handler guy for a while. That this is the big break, and then they come back, and then Deguello is after a long break, and they're kind of a hit band again. They're entering that Warner phase from the London phase, right? And yeah, I absolutely am a huge proponent of the RCA years, the later stuff. I think Rhythmine is one of their best albums. I love Mescalero to death as well. And I really like Antenna a lot as well. Not so much XXX, and not so much La Futura, which I think is like the shorter and less interesting version of Mescalero. Mescalero is very interesting, and Rhythmine is very heavy. And yeah, there's we won't go into it, but there's some stories about alternate drummers and things on some of those records, which are amazing. I mean, the drumming is really cool on Rhythmine, but yeah, so I like all this stuff as well. And when Eliminator came out, we had our one time we had an actual professional band playing the bars, and we played a Bad Girl, and I got the 6 off of that album and nothing else, because we only wanted to play the 2 heaviest songs. So those were the 2 songs we played off of Eliminator, which is funny. We played LaGrange and She Loves Your Automobile as well. So we were kind of like a ZZ Top tribute band.
Nice. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Rhythmine, because I drifted away from ZZ Top, as the 80s went on. But I did Rhythmine. I got that, and I was just back into it, man. That is just a fantastic album. Love the guitar tone on that. I forgot to ask at the beginning of the episode, have you done any ZZ Top books?
No, but it just got announced. I'm going to be doing one of those, one of the big illustrated history things. And it's just going to be a straight, super detailed timeline. Like I did with about half of the ones I've done for Weimar, have just been straight timeline, like the Uriah Heep. The Thin Lizzy was a straight timeline. The Van Halen, I think, was a straight timeline. So yeah, we're going to do one of those. Lots of great pictures. Talk about a super photogenic band. I mean, just all the costumes and moves and everything. I mean, too bad we can't show the moves, because the moves are killer, right? There are just some video things I just.
All right, stand up, Martin. Let's do it. Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, but the best ones are like the subtle things, like just the little turn at one time or whatever. It's just like a half little step or whatever.
Yeah, it's amazing.
There's some magic videos out there.
Getting ready to do this, went down a ZZ Top rabbit hole for the last week, and I've been watching some live videos, and it's just funny how they'll just do these one or two little steps, Dusty and Billy, you know, they'll just move their guitar up like this just for, because they've just played a million gigs. These guys are just connected, you know, psychically at the hip and everything. So it's fantastic. All right, so I'll be leaving a link, I forgot to mention, to Martin, to where you can get more information on Martin, and you can keep your eye out then for this ZZ Top book that Martin's has in the works. So, all right, we're gonna jump in here. We're gonna go album by album. We're gonna give our thoughts on the record and give you some of our favorite songs from those records. So we're going to start with their first album, ZZ Top's first album. This came out in 1971. Interestingly, on the back here, you can see the guys here, you know, before Beard, Billy. Frank is listed as Rube Beard. So I'm not quite sure what that's about, but that's how he's listed on the back here. So Martin, what are your thoughts on the first ZZ Top album and some of your favorite songs?
Yeah, I was never a big fan. You know, it definitely has all the elements. This sounds like, it reminds me a little bit of my slight misgivings of the first Max Webster album compared to all the other ones, where there's this sort of, it feels like it really feels like the first album, but all the cards are in place, like all the elements of being an interesting, exciting version of the blues are there, but they really don't take it very far. So to me, this is the bluesiest and the most conservative of all the albums. I think it's probably, you know, I don't think Tres Hombres is that well recorded, but I don't think this is that well recorded either. It's missing some high end on it, but it's got a ton of warmth to it. That's for sure. My favorite songs on here are Brown Sugar, which is kind of like a Sabbathy blues thing. So that's the thing. Sometimes the blues, you know, when people erroneously call Black Sabbath a blues band, even Tony for that matter, right? Whatever. I mean, Black Sabbath to me has no blues in it, basically. But there is this one little tributary where the blues gets kind of Sabbathy, and you think of Whipping Post and things like that. Like there are some heavy blues songs, and I think ZZ Top is smart to exploit that direction a little bit. And I think Brown Sugar is one of these big, heavy sort of songs. I think Going Down to Mexico is pretty cool. It's getting a little metal, a little complicated. And that's what I like. But yes, Squank, dull old kind of funky blues thing to that. Another one I like is Bedroom Thing. Again, heavy enough again. And again, it's got you know, that 10% doom added to it, right? That's kind of cool to hear in there. So I want these songs that are moving ahead, kind of just like you from here. So, you know, it's again, spoiler alert, I know we're going to rank these at the end. This is probably my least favorite out of all of these, because it is just it's the most brown period, the most brown sound, the most early Foghat kind of ZZ Top album. There you go.
Yeah, what I find interesting about this record is that, you know, especially during this era, there were a lot of bands that would take them 2 or 3 albums to find their sound, or sometimes more. Think about Deep Purple had their psychedelic, you know, phase. Bands like UFO had their space rock phase. But they pretty much land here with the ZZ Top vibe and sound is there. This blues-based sound. Billy Gibbons arrives pretty much fully formed here. He's a young 22-year-old guy playing the blues very, very, you know, convincingly, like a wizened old blues veteran. So the chemistry is there amongst the band. What I think is lacking a little bit is the songwriting. The songwriting isn't there yet. The things that they would become known for with their songwriting, the catchiness, the kind of double innuendos in the lyrics and stuff like that, that quite hasn't arrived yet. So you do get a lot of things on here that are, like you mentioned, kind of more straight ahead blues. But it is interesting, again, how they, you know, the sort of the Z, you can see here the formula is here. Like I think you said it, the cards are on the table here. It's not like there's sort of searching around trying to figure out what kind of band they're going to be. You know, they just haven't quite gotten the hooks and the songwriting together yet. So for me, I really like Somebody Else Has Been Shaking Your Tree. I think that kind of has foreshadows this sort of classic ZZ Top feel and vibe that we're going to get on later records. I also really like Brown Sugar. It starts off real kind of down and nasty with, you know, the guitar by itself, and then it kicks in, like you said, kind of heavy proto metal doomish, you know, if you will. And I also like Old Man. I like ZZ Top when they do kind of melodic, sweet ballads, and this is kind of one of them. I like this sort of chord progression and just the slow melodic nature of it. So, all right, we move on next to Rio Grande Mud from 1972. What are your thoughts on this one, Martin, and your favorite songs?
Yeah, I mean, just to add, you know, in terms of the history, ZZ Top's coming into this situation, veterans of pretty much 5 years each for them. You know, to put a loose term on it, lots of different bands. They know how to entertain. They're big musicologist kind of guys. And I think, you know, like you say, it's kind of interesting. They aren't a band that is way off with a different sound and then found their sound, like your Deep Purple example. They're a band that comes in more or less with their sound, just kind of rougher conservative version of it, but they have learned from the likes of and been inspired by the likes of Jimi Hendrix Experience Trio, Cream Trio, Led Zeppelin, for all intents and purposes a trio, right? So they're coming in knowing that everybody's got to step beyond the boringness of the British blues boom and do something exciting. And that's why we get this band. So yeah, moving on to the second one. The funny thing here is, again, it's the Brown sound, but it's almost like they parachute in two amazing their best songs of all time on top of an album that's at least as good as the first one, if not a little better. And those would be, for me, the two hits off of the album, minor hits on the album. Francine, which is just a joyous sort of Rolling Stones send up. It's almost like the best song the Rolling Stones never wrote. And then Just Got Paid, which is one of my favorite ZZ Top songs of all time. It's heavy, it's groovy, it's hooky, it's complicated, it's different. You know, so right off the bat, I mean, ZZ Top goes another 50 years or whatever it is, and, you know, arguably they never did a better song. I mean, that's just such a really, really cool song. So that's cool about this. Nothing from the first album just shines like Just Got Paid or you know, arguably Francine for me. And I really like Whiskey Mama on here too, which is pretty cool and heavy, and Down Brownie is kind of cool. That's almost like heavy Lynyrd Skynyrd. So, you know, there's the other big debate. Are they a Southern rock band? I've done a podcast episode of honorary Southern rock bands. And to me, this is, you know, they sound very Southern rock in a certain way. But they're heavy, you know, kind of like Blackfoot kind of steps out because they're too heavy, sort of thing. And then the other reason, of course, is they're from Texas, and is Texas part of Southern rock or whatever, right? So yeah, to me, this is still a very, you know, a pretty conservative album, but it really steps out with some, you know, more innovative writing, and it's just that little bit brighter and more exciting because of it.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is kind of one step closer to, you know, the classic ZZ Top sound here. The songwriting is getting a little bit better. I'm totally with you. I love Francine, and yeah, Just Got Paid, one of my favorite ZZ Top songs. That opening riff is just absolutely killer. And when the band comes in, you know, I'm talking about swing and groove. Boy, oh boy, this just you gotta love it, you know. And what I love about something like this, again, ZZ Top, like AC/DC, simple formula, blues, couple chords, guitar, bass, drums, essentially, you know, same thing with AC/DC. But it's all in the feel of this. And this song, Just Got Paid, is just, it's all about feel. It's all about that main riff and you know, the vocals and that laid back nature. It's got a little bit of a nasty sort of vibe to it, which I think is just a little snarl to it or something, you know, and the vocal delivery that I think is just so cool. And then on the flip side of it, my other favorite song on this, and I mentioned that I like the ballads. So Sure Got Cold After the Rain, you know, the way they can just pull it way back and just have tons of open space. And, you know, Billy here picking his notes so carefully, you know, there's so much space in the sound. There's so much room, and in lesser hands, it could be a disaster. But these guys can play with so much soul, and Billy, just knows the exact right note to play. You can hear it shaking the string and just his vibrato and everything on it. It reminds me a little bit of, if I think of another guitarist that reminds me a little bit of Billy Gibbons from the same era, roughly, would be Paul Kossoff from Free. Free was also about kind of big spaces and that sort of laid back groove thing. And Paul Kossoff also had that really authentic blues kind of soulful type of playing. So yeah, so those are the ones that I really love off this one. All right, well, we move on now, and this is kind of a big one for them. This is maybe maybe a little bit of a breakout album. I would say they sort of land on the classic ZZ Top. So they've been moving towards this, and they land on it here with Tres Hombres from '73. So what are your thoughts and favorites on this one?
Yeah, so we get to this one, and this is sort of the move from I guess it's Robin Hood's studio on the first two, more or less, and then this one is, I think it's like half Ardent, half not, but it's Terry Manning is a big important part of this. Worked with Led Zeppelin as well. I think, boy, have we lost Terry Manning? I think he might have died recently. I hope I'm right about that. But he's an important guy at Ardent Studios. It is produced by Bill Ham, but I think Terry Manning is the secret weapon on here. I love this album. It's absolutely chock full of amazing stuff. But I do have some others that are a little more favorites, and I've always kind of had it in for the sound of this. I find it a little mid-rangey, but Waiting for the Bus is cool enough. Jesus Just Left Chicago. Those are the two that are always played in succession because they just go in one into each other, and one is a slow blues. But Beer Drinkers and Hellraisers, I named my Motorhead book that, and Motorhead covered that song. That's just a good heavy metal rocker. Master of Sparks is, again, Master of Sparks and Precious and Grace are two of my top 6 or 7 ZZ Top songs of all time. Is them in that proggy, complicated, interesting, be well beyond the blues zone masterpieces. This is where, I also did a podcast episode too that you had to be there and you didn't have to be there. You had to be there are songs that you have to convince somebody, or albums that, maybe you had to be there to get into it. But you didn't have to be there is songs that are objectively sound like kind of the work of genius, right? And that, to me, on this record is Master of Sparks and Precious and Grace. They just sound really smart and intelligent, like cool, well put together songs. And Move Me On Down the Line, to me, is a little bit like a Francine. It's just a good kind of Rolling Stonesy, good time melodic sort of rocker. Never been a big LaGrange fan. Chic is really cool, but I'm not a fan of Have You Heard or really Jesus Just Left Chicago, the two most rote blues. And then Hot Blue and Righteous, not a massive fan as well. I guess that's in 3/4 time, right? It's kind of like a mellow 3/4 time sort of song. So yeah, this has some amazing songs on it, but it's got a few places where I'm like 5, 6 out of 10 on some of these songs. So when I put down this album, people are always a little horrified because it's the same way that I kind of put down Machine Head from Deep Purple. Like there's some spots on it, some long spots on Machine Head that I'm not crazy about, right? And I kind of have the same thing on here, but yeah, you look at this, the variety on it, the pacing, the sequencing, there's just so much to love all over this album.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. And like you mentioned, this has their, first big hit, LaGrange. And I'm actually not a fan of a lot of their big hits, LaGrange being one of them. Maybe it's just because as a musician, every cover band played it, it's just been played to death. But the rest of the album, it's great. I do like Waiting on the Bus and Jesus Just Left Chicago. Man, that transition from that song to the next, the way it sort of gear shifts a little bit is just fantastic. Like you said, it's one of those songs that they always get played together, a la We Will Rock You, We Are the Champions. What's the Journey song, Feeling That Way? And there's always something that comes after that or before that. You know what I mean? Okay. It's one of those two songs that just, you always think of them together. Beer Drinkers and Hellraisers is just awesome. You know, it doesn't surprise me that, you know, that's a pretty heavy song, and the way that riff is chugging and everything. The lyrics are awesome. I haven't mentioned too that I always loved the fact that Billy and Dusty are vocalists. Not only that, but I love when they trade off within a verse, within a song. To me, that is so cool. And you get that sort of in Beer Drinkers, and, you know, Billy sings a line, Dusty sings the next line. I just think that that's super cool. And their voices are similar enough, but different enough that they complement each other, and the way they harmonize with each other, I just think is just super, super cool. Master of Sparks is a fantastic song. You know, that opening riff, and when it has a little bit of a dark sort of vibe to it, a little bit of an ominous vibe to it, that I think is just fantastic. And like you said, just really smart songwriting. And I've said this already, I love when they get sweet and mellow. So Hot, Blue, and Righteous, I do like that one. I like when they just sort of shift gears and pull it back a little bit and get, you know, melodic like that. So. All right, let's see here. Next, we've got Fandango from 1975. Now, the first side of this record is live, and the second side is studio stuff. And I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Martin, their manager did this like really big tour thing that they assembled, and there's even a picture on the inside here of, you know, the big stadium show and everything. So I'm assuming that the live stuff on this is from that sort of big tour that they had planned there. So what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. Master of Sparks, before we move on, is it's got that cool lyric story where the idea of that song is that, you know, just for fun out in Texas when you're bored, this idea of there was this metal cage that you could put someone in, and you'd put it on the back of a pickup truck, and you'd roll down the highway, you know, through the tumbleweed, and you'd push the ball off the back of the truck, and this big metal ball would roll around on the highway at high speeds, throwing off sparks, and this was your amusement. And there's a guy inside rolling all up and down. So
I never heard that before.
That's
awesome.
what Master of Sparks is all about. So and you know, the other thing to mention is I always compare the great vocals of Billy and Dusty to the BTO situation, where you've got Randy Bachman and Fred Turner, and they even look the same. They're, you know, they both wear nudie suits and cowboy hats around this era, right? The little bit of overweightness going, you know, and the beards, I mean, they look the same. And so Fred Turner is your growly voice, dusty hollerer guy. And then Billy is the guy with a few different gears. I mean, Randy is actually more of a lighter, you know, innocent sort of sounding voice, but Billy can do that as well. And Billy can, you know, put vocal fry on as well. But Dusty, one of his great kind of regrets in life, I think, as life went on, is that he loved singing so much. He would have wanted to be even more of a lead singer and probably make records singing. He considered himself, his pride and joy was more his singing than his bass playing. I can't recall exactly where the live stuff is recorded. I doubt it would have been at one of these big outdoor situations, but yeah, there were these big outdoor. We'll get to, you know, later on is kind of like the worldwide Texas tour where they actually have the live animals and all that. Yeah. But you're right, there is this early on, there is this big stadium thing that he tries to do. But Fandango is such a frustrating album. Me, like a lot of people, this isn't an odd view at all, contrarian view or anything, but I just find the whole live side a big throwaway. I really don't care. I really don't like it. You know, it's one of the big ZZ Top regrets is we didn't get a big double live album, right? Right after Eliminator or Afterburner or something like that, or even to end the 70s to have a classic double live album. Well, that would have been incredible from this band, but we never did get that. All we got is this. It's kind of like a Kiss Alive 2 situation, right? But yeah, so I'm not crazy about that. But side two, I always say, is my favorite side of ZZ Top of all time. It's absolutely chock full of amazing songs. The only letdown, probably like you're going to say as well, this is not a good hit. Tush, to bring up BTO again, always reminds me of Taking Care of Business, which is, you know, BTO's biggest song, and I kind of hate it. It's just like a dumb, boring boogie song, not a very good boogie song, and I think Tush is kind of like that as well. But the whole rest of it, Nasty Dogs and Funky Kings, is exactly like your Master of Sparks and your Precious and Grace. I always put those ones together as these really complicated, cool, dark, heavy songs. Blue Jean Blues is pretty cool as well. I don't mind it. Balinese is so cool. It's just very warm and interesting and a little funny and just like really relaxed. Mexican Blackbird is hilarious. It's like a country song and done really well. And Heard It on the X, I always pair that one with Just Got Paid. It's the same kind of song, just this really good, complicated, smart, interesting, up-tempo, kind of ZZ Top heavy one. So yeah, I think Balinese and Mexican Blackbird are songs that your heart loves, and then Heard It on the X and Nasty Dogs and Funky Kings are songs that cerebrally you love. They're songs you didn't have to be there. You could just play those and go, wow, those guys are smarty pants metal makers.
Yeah, I'm like you with this record. The live side on it, it has like that blues melody and everything, medley, and it just doesn't do a whole lot for me. And like you said, totally disappointing that they didn't release a cool classic 70s double live record. It could have came maybe during that hiatus period or right before Eliminator. I would have just loved to have had a cool live record from here, sort of encapsulating the whole 70s vibe of the band before they shifted to, in the 80s there. Also Tush, for me, it falls into the same category as LaGrange. I've heard it way too many times on the radio. I've heard way too many cover bands play it. I'm just bored of it. Never liked it. Never really liked it, to be honest with you. So my favorites on this are Nasty Dogs and Funky Kings for the groove and the vibe of it, and Heard It on the X for the reasons that you mentioned too. It has sort of that Just Got Paid thing to it. So those are my two here from Fandango. All right, now we move on to another big one, Tejas. This is 1976. This one had, got a little trifold thing here with the guys. So what are your thoughts on this one?
Just before we move on, I just want to comment on the live thing. It's like, it would have been a big hit record and would have been talked about for history. It would have been a classic rock classic, but this is one of those situations where I can't picture better versions than the studio versions of some of these songs we love so much, right? So that's one thing. I think just the performance and the production, everything is exquisite about what they did on the studio one. So I have a feeling that all live versions would pale in comparison to the studio versions. And then also compounding that is the fact that they're a trio, right?
Yeah.
So they got their hands full up there. As good as they are, I just think being a trio, with a little bit of studio trickery, and there's much more that, as time goes on, but I think whatever they did to these classic songs, these favorite, heavy, complicated songs from these early albums, they weren't going to sound any better on a live album.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, it's not a case of like Kiss, you mentioned Kiss Alive, where the first like 3 Kiss records those songs sound way better on a live. ZZ is a band that, a lot of bands talk about how they play live in the studio, but it really does feel like they are in the room playing together. I've mentioned AC/DC already in this discussion. Let There Be Rock from AC/DC has that same feel, all the guys in the room together, amps cranked, just rocking it out. And you're right, they, Billy, and he mentions this in some interviews, he would add a little extra rhythm guitar when he jumped into a solo, or a little guitar to double it for the stereo effect and everything like that. But it was never like, something like so nothing like Queen or something like that, where there's millions of guitars. It was really just there to sort of fill out the sound. And it's really true. They are a band that seem to be able to capture their sound in the studio, where some bands seem to chase that their whole careers, trying to do the reverse, trying to capture their live sound in the studio. ZZ Top seems to have been really good at being able to get that. So.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
All right. So
Tejas.
Tejas is my favorite ZZ Top album. It has been for years. I love the fact that it's super brave and they've moved forward, and it's less heavy than all the others really so far, because it uses kind of this I always call it, like, it sounds like they're playing in a matchbox, but in a good way, unlike late 80s Rush. Here there's a closeness and there's an intimacy, and Frank's got these interesting counterpoint rhythms that he's discovered that he uses a lot on this album. It's kind of a signature on it. But It's Only Love is again, it's a little bit of a Mexican Blackbird. It's kind of a cool, funny, charming country song. And then Arrested for Driving While Blind, that's just a kind of a good rocker. And there's a few songs on here that are written heavy but aren't performed and arranged heavy, and this is one of those that it just feels, you just feel that tightness, that there's this tension to it, but it isn't just strident blow your speakers heavy metal version of it, but it's kind of written like a heavy song. And then we've got El Diablo is another one where it's got it feels like it's written heavy, but the arrangement, there's not a lot of guitar. It's a little bit like Master of Sparks in that way. It's just got this kind of moody mysteriousness to it, but it's kept kind of really atmospheric and cool. Snappy Khaki is one where Frank's using that kind of point counterpoint kind of beat. It's got a jazziness. It's got a little bit of that Deguello adventurousness that we're going to hear. Enjoy It and Getting It On is another one of these fast, cool ones that's got a little bit of Heard It on the X and Just Got Paid to it, but it's again performed like you're in a smoky little bar with not a lot of people, and it's all atmosphere, and the bartender's going to kick you out if you play too loud, kind of thing, right? So that's kind of cool. $10 Man, kind of complicated, but country rock again. I love the country rockness of this album. Pan Am Highway Blues, can't remember in my head what that sounds like. Avalon Highway is a cool one as well. That one is a little more, that beat is back on that. Yeah, Pan Am Highway Blues is kind of like Southern rocky, poppy, kind of cool sound. And She's a Heartbreaker, we're back to the country, and I think that one's got fiddle in it, possibly. Yeah. And I just love when they, it's weird that I don't like when they do the blues, but I love when they do country. That's perfectly fine for me, right? And Asleep in the Desert, I remember when I was playing guitar a little bit back in the old days, that was one that I learned the whole thing on, right? I mean, yeah. I went through this phase where I was picking up a lot of ZZ Top. I love their solos, right? So I was learning a lot of Billy's solos on guitar. But yeah, so that's just an acoustic instrumental, which is just so cool. So yeah, I love the variety on this, but what I love the most about it is the bravery not to be heavy and not to really be seeking hits with cheap laughs, sort of thing. I mean, they might, you could accuse them of doing that maybe a little bit before, and then they definitely do it a lot after. But I just think this is a piece of art. This is like an artwork of them being like super creative and trying something different.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I absolutely love this record, top to bottom. This was, like I mentioned, one of the first ones that I got here from this era, and I was just floored by it. I pretty much love every song on it. The band is just totally clicking. There's just chemistry amongst all of them that is just fantastic, and you just sort of feel it coming out of the grooves of the record. I like the production on it. So It's Only Love, love it. Rested While Driving Blind. I love $10 Man and Pan Am Highway Blues. I always kind of think of those two songs together. And in Pan Am Highway, there's that riff. Oh, I love it. And that like intro of the ball do da ball that
Yeah.
heavy, almost Sabbathy like thing to it. And then when it drops into the melody, it's kind of, oh man, just so melodic. Love it. She's a heartbreaker. You mentioned sort of this country vibe to them. I think what appeals to me when they go into that vibe is the melodies. The melodies get very melodic. They get very sweet, but you still have sort of the, the dirty Texas grooving going on underneath it. So I think, I hear that song and I just picture the cowboy hats. I just picture Texas. It's, I had this thinking about these videos that, and maybe you've done this with your history in 5 songs, bands that embody the where they are from. ZZ Top is a Texas band. They could not be from New York. They could not be from Finland or something. You know what I mean? They are just a through and through Texas band. You hear them, you see them, you think about Texas, and like She's a Heartbreaker, just all that imagery, the cowboys, the whole thing just coming to my mind. And like you said, Asleep in the Desert, it's just a beautiful ballad with that gentle acoustic guitar. And it kind of makes me wish that maybe they had done more instrumental type ballads. And it's just a really cool, mellow way to take you out on the record. Again, the tumbleweeds blowing by through the Clint Eastwood Fistful of Dollars town, type of thing. It's just fantastic. So okay, we are now, so they take a little hiatus here, as we talked about earlier, and they come back in 1979 with Deguello. This has the hit Cheap Sunglasses on it. That was a big, huge hit for them. So what do you think about this one? What's your favorites on this one?
Wow, yeah. So I love Deguello. This is the oversleeve it came in, right? So this is the album cover that was around the thing. It just looked like that, and then there's your kind of little credity stuff on the bottom, and then this fit right inside it, right? And then it also had the the picture of the lone wolf horns. ZZ Top just said, hey, if we're going to put horns on an album, we got to learn how to play them ourselves. So they learned horns good enough to be able to play them on the record themselves. And the only reason this isn't my favorite ZZ Top album is I'm just not crazy that it's got 2 covers on it. So it's got I Thank You and Dust My Broom. And both of those are, if I didn't know they were covers, I would have thought that they were ZZ Top songs because they sound so perfect on here, and they're not boring. They're both pretty cool songs. What I love about this album, again, is a little bit themed for the same reason I like Tejas, is that I just love the production on it. And here they do a lot of little tricks and ear candy. I mean, to me, I've always called this ZZ Top's Steely Dan album in a way. It's just a joy to listen to from a production point of view. But I love I'm Bad, I'm Nationwide. I love Fool for Your Stockings, even though it's kind of like a slower blues, but it's kind of a neat jazzy blues. Again, it's a little bit of that Randy Bachman, I like jazz sort of thing. Manic Mechanic is amazing on here as well. Low Down in the Streets is Street is good. And again, Low Down in the Street and something like I'm Bad, I'm Nationwide, and even Cheap Sunglasses. And even a little bit Esther Be the One, which is one of my favorite ZZ Top songs of all time. There is a little bit of this, again, written heavy, but not arranged or performed heavy to it. So there's these songs where you could picture a heavy metal band doing them and making them sound much heavier. And there's a little bit of that on Tejas as well. But yeah, Cheap Sunglasses is it was a hit and all that, and I remember as a kid I wasn't crazy about it because this album wasn't super heavy or anything. Gone are the big distorted riffs of some of the earlier albums, but I love Cheap Sunglasses. The ones I'm least favorite that are my least favorites are, again, ironically, a song we played live with our band Torque. She Loves My Automobile. I don't like very much. Like I say, I don't like the 2 covers. And then Hi-Fi Mama is it's interesting enough. It's got some ear candy, but it is kind of a boogie rock song. And this one's sung by Frank, which is not Frank, Dusty, which is really cool as well. But yeah. Esther Be the One. What a classic, unheralded classic on here. It wasn't one of the big hits, but the guitar playing on that from Billy. Billy's I always cite Billy as one of my top 3 favorite guitarists of all time, along with Brian May and Kim Mitchell. And basically you hear so much amazing, cool Billy on Esther Be the One. So yeah, this is full of a lot of super interesting things. And I think, like I say, the most interesting thing is that there are a lot of interesting bells and whistles and little cheap guffaws on it, right? There's some good cheap laughs all over the place on this record, and it's just highly entertaining.
Yeah, I think this is when they start maybe experimenting a little bit more in the studio. Up to this point, they're pretty much relatively straightforward with their studio approach. I never realized I Thank You was a cover till way later, on after I had been listening to this song. So I always dug that song. I think, like you said, it does sound like classic ZZ Top. I'm Bad, I'm Nationwide, I think is really cool. And I dig A Fool for Your Stockings also, something we haven't mentioned. We talked about the country side of ZZ Top. Well, every now and then when they do get a little bit jazzy to their sound, I think Billy is and the band is very convincing when they do that kind of thing. And I mentioned that I typically don't like the big hits from this era, but I do like Cheap Sunglasses, and I think it's just mainly for that ba-da-ba-ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Reminds me of like Frankenstein from Edgar Winter. It has that kind of really heavy heft to it, and then that part in the song with the woo woo, just classic, right? So I always loved Cheap Sunglasses. Okay, so here we are. We're up to the last album, seventh album here before the MTV era of the band, before Eliminator. We are now in the 80s, 1981, and we've got El Loco. Now, interesting with this, Billy talks about how we were talking about how the band was really able to capture their live sound in the studio. Billy mentions it on this record was the first time that they recorded separately. They didn't record it like all together live like they did all the previous records. This album you would hear some synth sounds on here, some more electronic sounds, and this is kind of foreshadowing where they're going to go with Eliminator and on through the 80s. This would have two hits on it, Tube Snake Boogie and Pearl Necklace. So what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this is their other Steely Dan album, right? This is also a really pristine, good sounding record. And it's a little more mainstream sounding, even just in the production, than Deguello, which has a kind of like a charming eccentricity about it. But this is like everything's correct on it. Everything sounds really good. And you really hear that on Pearl Necklace when you can just listen to that bass line and drums and what's going on top, and then the clean guitar and it really sounds like Steely Dan, that one, right? But yeah, this is an album that is kind of a love it or hate it or like it album. I mean, this is one that a lot of people kind of put down in the estimation because it is a little mainstreamy. I don't know if I'd agree that there's too much from this album that feels like it's part of the next phase, other than the carefulness of the recording. But it's very, very analog still. It doesn't have that, very much in terms of any kind of, true, electronics or synthesizerness to it, other than I guess it's what is it? Groovy Little Hippie Pad, I suppose, has a bit of that. Heaven, Hell, or Houston. So it's got some effects, right?
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. I Want to Drive You Home is kind of a slinky, bluesy sort of thing. 10-Foot Pole was the other one that's a fair bit of a hit off this. That was played on the radio a lot, and that's a good, funny one that feels like a Deguello song, I think. Tube Snake Boogie is just too kind of traditional and dancey boogie. I was never a big fan of that, but Pearl Necklace is quite an innovative, interesting song. It's got neat chord sequence to it, and I do like Groovy Little Hippie Pad and Heaven, Hell, or Houston. Heaven, Hell, or Houston reminds me of Manic Mechanic a little bit from the previous one. Party on the Patio is kind of like a poppy new wavy song. It sounds a little bit B-52s to me, I suppose. It's So Hard is a really great sort of mellow, interesting, soft one on here. And Layla is a true ballad. Like Layla is just like a really sincere poppy. I think Layla is kind of the lightning rod on this album where fans went, no, that's a bridge too far. That's really too much, right? And so people remember that as the bad memory of the El Loco album the most, I think. But I think there's a lot of great stuff on here to to make this a good solid album.
Yeah, unfortunately, I fall on the side of the fence of I just don't like this one. It's like you can hear that they're in their mind, they're thinking of the Eliminator era, but they don't know how to do that yet. So it's like they're sort of, it's a very well produced record, like you said. And I do like Pearl Necklace. It's a very easy on the ears, maybe one of their best from a production standpoint albums, but for me it just totally lacks the things that I love about this era of the band, the dirtiness, the little bit of grime on the guitar strings. It just seems to be missing on this. It's a little bit too polished. It sounds dated. To me, it's like that awkward, like early kind of 80s period, whereas all these other albums, you might say the first ZZ Top album is a little boxy and dry, but I'll take that any day over this kind of slicker, more polished sounding thing. So the album just doesn't work for me. So really the only thing I can recommend off of this is Pearl Necklace, and 10-Foot Pole, I guess is kind of cool too, but this album just doesn't do anything for me. So all right, well, you want to rank them, least favorite to your favorite from all the records we talked about?
Sure. So my ranking would go starting at the bottom, ZZ Top's first album. Again, I love what you just said, boxy and dry. That's kind of how it feels to me. Conservative, too bluesy. Then I'll go second from the bottom, Rio Grande Mud, for basically the same reasons, but I like a few more songs, so that sort of thing. I got to go Fandango next because I really, the live side is just such a wasteland for me. It's got covers, and then everything that's not a cover is kind of still boogie rock and bluesy. It's just got that real theme to it, as you correctly mentioned. I'll go El Loco next. I do really like that album. I play it a lot. Tres Hombres, I have to be, somewhat responsible and put that fairly high. But, honestly, I probably, for the last 15 or 20 years, and for the next 20 years, if I get 20 more years, I'll probably play El Loco more than I'll play Tres Hombres in life, sort of thing. It's one of those you can kind of keep going back to because you don't know it so well all the time, right? So 4 El Loco, 3 Tres Hombres, 2 Deguello, 1 Tejas. Those two are very close together for me. And obviously they're close in time, even though they're separated by a bunch of time with that big break that we talked about earlier. But yeah, those two are both similar to me, for me. And I find them both very creative and entertaining.
Cool. All right. For me, from my least favorite to favorite, Loco, for all the reasons that I just mentioned a couple minutes ago. Fandango, same thing, like you said, comes in number 6 for me, just because the live side is just a kind of a disappointment and feels like a waste. Where are we at here? 5, ZZ Top's first album, just because the songwriting hasn't quite arrived yet. 4, Deguello. 3, Rio Grande Mud. And really, I could probably swap out either of these two, but I'm going to go number 2, Tres Hombres. And I've got to go with the one that got me into this whole era, Tejas. So
nice.
All right, well, there you go.
We agree on our number 1. Pretty cool. And
yeah.
Out there, that's probably a slightly contrarian view, because out there in the world, I'm pretty sure Tres Hombres always wins.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that is sort of usually Tejas and Tres Hombres are the ones that land up at the top of everybody's list. But it's cool that you like El Loco, and I like what you said about, this could be a topic for a video too, are albums and bands catalogs that you feel like you can go to them because you're not burnt out on them, like AC/DC Fly on the Wall, I might say is one of those where I feel like I can go to that and I'm not burnt. It's a flawed record. It has its flaws, but it's an album you can sort of go to because you're not burnt out on it, and there's things that you can sort of hear and still enjoy. And with any band that's called like ZZ Top that has so many hits, you know, when you do listen to some of these things and LaGrange comes up, you're just kind of like, you know, skip, you know. And there's a lot of bands that unfortunately, you know, suffer from that. The big hits, you get burnt out on them over the years. So.
LaGrange is a funny one. Yeah, I did a whole episode of the podcast on shuffles. I've not been a big shuffle fan. I mean, I like when Black Sabbath does it. I like when Cathedral does it because they're doing exactly what Sabbath's doing. But even, and I'm sort of like when Heap does it. Well, I don't even like when Heap does it, but I don't like when ZZ Top does it either. I've always had it in for shuffles. Never just been a big fan.
Yeah, I'm kind of that way with boogie stuff. It's really got to be like, and the same thing with the blues stuff too. It's like I get really bored if it's just your standard da 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 da, you know, like that kind of blues type thing. So I would say for me, it's the shuffle stuff or the boogie stuff is like your shuffle stuff. It's AC/DC boogies the right way for me. ZZ Top boogies the right way for me. But you know, I'm very particular about my boogies. So, all right. Well, Martin, I'd like to thank you for joining me here at the Lair. This was a absolutely fascinating discussion of a band that both of us clearly really like. So let us know in the comments down below what you guys think of this era of the band. Hopefully this excites somebody. Maybe if you're somebody that only knows them from Legs and Give Me All Your Lovin' and that stuff, you know, hopefully this inspires you to go and check out this era of the band, because there's some really great stuff from this era of the band. And also we mentioned Rhythmine earlier. I'm a huge fan of that record. I know Martin is also. Some of that stuff too you want to check out. Maybe start with Rhythmine for later era ZZ Top. All right, so let us know in the comments what you guys think, what your picks are, what you thought of our picks, and make sure you check Martin's link for more information on his stuff. Thanks again, Martin, and until we see you all again, make sure you rock hard, ride free.